Yo, what's cracking, y'all? Got ourselves a Ram 2500 HD. Alright, we're doing a U-joint. I'm going to tell you how we got here. Alright, so obviously, first thing that comes off is the tire. 24 millimeter socket on that. Alright, then we got to take our brakes apart. It's pretty easy. We got 2 bolts in the back of the caliper. And I'm pretty sure I have a video of doing the front brakes on one of these. Just search up fur curl, Dodge 2500 or something, or go through my car repair playlist. All right, I believe those were 12 millimeter bolts. Yeah, there they are right there, 12 millimeter bolts, boom. And then we gotta take our mounting bracket off. 2 bolts on the back of there, 18 millimeter, those big honkers. All right, and then hammer your rotor off. If you're saving your rotor, don't hit your friction surface, hit in between your lug studs. It'll pop off of there. And then you got to take your hub assembly off. And here's our hub assembly. If it looks anything even remotely rusty like this, just buy yourself a new hub assembly to put in. This one's 8 lug. The way we do that, we cut the wheel one way. I took the tie rod off. It took like 2 seconds. Just so I could spin really easy. And I'm thinking about replacing it, but that's another video. All right, so we got 4 holes in the back of the hub assembly. Those are 18 millimeters as well. I had to clean them up, heat them up, everything. Cleaned up the threads that were sticking through the hub assembly. Still wouldn't come out. Busted out the big guns, the torch, and torched a line down every bolt. You could just cut that wire off if you are replacing your hub. Cut a line down every bolt, sprayed it with PB Blaster, then hit it with my air impact from the back, and then hammered this sucker out. It's in there. Hammer on the back of this, back and forth. That wasn't enough to get it out. It did soak a PB Blaster overnight. I used an air chisel as well as hammering. Air chisel, pointy bit to get in between the ears. And it eventually worked its way out. This is cleaned up. Took my wire wheel, cleaned it all up. This was incredibly rusty. Everything's cleaned up and it still looks rusty. This was ridiculous to get off. You're probably not going to run into that unless you're up north like me. All right, there we go. With the hub assembly off, the axle shaft just pulls right through this open hole. Boom. You got your axle shaft out. That's how we get there. All right. So I cleaned off this. This was all rusty. Now this axle shaft, sometimes the spline sees to the inside of the hub where it goes in. Squirts a PB Blaster inside there. You can put your air chisel with a pointy bit right here like I did, shiny metal, to get it to separate from the hub. I'm going to clean up everything. Here's our U-joint right here. And this thing just wobbles all over. See that? It's making a ruckus going down the road. There's our bearing cap. You can barely see it. It is so rusted together. So I'm going to hit this with the wire wheel so I can see my bearing caps all the way around. You can use a bench vise, one of these vices to do the U-joint. You can use big C-clamps. But seeing how this one's so rusty, I guarantee you I need to come over to the shop press and use the shop press to press these out. I have videos on all that. Type in fur curl, U-joint replacement. I've even got one video I think I show all 3 different styles. Or 4, you can use a ball joint press as well. So I can use the ball joint press or the shop press on this one. And I'm gonna go with the shop press probably. And we might even have to use heat to get this sucker to snap free. All right. So if you need to know how to replace a U-joint in depth, I've got videos on that, but I am gonna go through some steps. All right. So as far as our wheel speed sensor, reinstalling the hub, there it is. It attaches to these little clips in the brake hose and goes all the way up there, up here, and disconnects right behind here. So there's that. We got our new hub assembly, our new U-joint in. Always get a heavy duty, greasable U-joint. All right. This is gonna take me a while to press these out. I'm assuming they are in there, just like the hub assembly. I'm not gonna film everything. Bearing caps are cleaned off. I even sprayed them down with some PB Blaster. These have been soaking in PB Blaster. There's these little clips inside. Before we take it to the press, we got to take a screwdriver or something and a hammer and pop these little clips out. See, that's the bearing cap, that's the clip, that's the yoke. All right, let's get all 4 of those out. They might come out in pieces. They look nasty. I've got her all set up in the 20-ton press, and it's pretty simple. Just using a socket because this is too wide. It needs to be, the socket needs to be smaller than the bearing cap. Story on the bottom, just used an old wheel bearing out of this pile here so that it has something to drop into with a hole. So you can't put it against a flat surface like that press plate, all right? So we're gonna press this, and hopefully the whole thing pushes down because our goal is to get that bearing cap out, right? I could use 2 press plates to use the circular holes or whatever. Any setup will work, just use common sense. I got those seats. And that's what'll happen. There'll be a big snap and it'll make you drop your phone. There we go. It actually came out no heat or anything. Those C-clips, 3 of them I got out with a hammer and a screwdriver. The other one came out in pieces. So we just keep on pressing until, ooh, it needs to go through there, but it doesn't seem to be moving. Too much rust buildup is what it looks like. I guess I should have cleaned these lips even more. Can't really get anything in there but a Dremel. So we're gonna keep on pressing. Oh, it looks like it's going through. Yeah, it's starting to make a little headway. All right, so I might have to clean up all the rust here. This almost never happens. All right, clean up all the rust here, press it back that way, you know, flip her over, and then clean up the rust there, because this rust lip is keeping this bearing cap from going down any further, which sucks. So we want to extract that bearing cap, which means we need to press further down, but we can't do it because it's not out of its groove enough. You can see it's still in there, right there. All right, so back to the drawing board. Let's decompress this, clean some more rust off, get back at her. All right, guys, after more abuse, more cleaning, wire wheeling, PB Blaster, we've got success here. We've got our bearing to push almost all the way through there on that cap on the inside. The one we're extracting will be on the bottom. So I'm gonna pop this out of the press, put it in the bench vise, and show you what I'm talking about. We got her back in the vise. You can see that bearing cap is almost out of there. So it's about as far as I wanted to press because you don't want to gouge up in there where the cross section of the U-joint becomes wider. You don't want to press it into your clean bore. So the goal is to get this spinning, the bearing cap. So we got some vice grips on it, and the vice grips are just spinning. We need a tighter grip. So once this cap starts spinning with vice grips, maybe use a little heat if you have to, it just pops out, and we'll show you that. Here we go. That's what she looks like with the bearing cap off, bearing cap on right there. Boom. Now we got to press this down that way so we can get that cap, and then we'll be able to slide this yoke off of the U-joint, and then we'll be able to press those 2 bearing caps, repeat the process out of there, and then we'll start pressing our new one in. The vice grips wasn't working for me because this thing's so rotted. I hooked up the air chisel, got an upward motion, best I could, and it just vibrated right out. Worked like a charm. Let's roll. All right, we're gonna take our new bearing caps off our new U-joint. Right there, see all those needle bearings in there? Make sure none of them move when you're installing. And we cleaned out and greased the inside of those bores, so that's pretty cool. We're gonna take the bottom one off here. There we go, none of them moved. We're gonna get that right up in there. And slide our U-joint in and put it down. Boom, Put a bearing cap in the top. Line it up with the needle bearings. There we go. Boom. Perfect. All right, it kind of fell down on me, and this bearing is not sticking up in there for me. I don't like it. We're just gonna give it a few taps to get it started, so it stops moving on me. There we go. Now it'll stay in there. While I was doing those taps, it feels like it came up and stuck on one of the bearings. So we need to make sure this guy goes in there straight. If we spin it, now we can get a look at it. And get the U-joint to go in. Making sure none of the bearings slid on me. Huh. We look in there, none of the bearings slid. I was good. I was just worried. It's better to double check than to install everything and realize it's screwed up. So we'll line it up with the bearings on the back side and give this a little taparoo. Just to get her started. There we go, and it slides between the two now. So all our bearings are all on the outside. Nothing slid. We loosen. When we are pressing it in the press, you don't want to lose these two bearing caps while you're doing that either. We'll just take them off. Set them to the side. So if you use your bench vise or your C-clamp, same basic story. A lot of times I use a big socket that goes over that instead of a wheel bearing for when you're pressing. This one, the pressure, back up. The pressure was too much. Would have had to have, at the very least, used the ball joint U-joint press. But as far as installing goes, now that I've cleaned all the rust up, we can use the bench vise if we want to. Now as we tighten this, we want to make sure our U-joint is good, going between those bearings. See, it's spinny, that's good. Now we're just gonna keep on pressing our vise. And I have it cockeyed, so I'm gonna have to loosen. That's fine, that's good. In our hardware package, we have grease cert. We're gonna put that in there. And we have our little C-clips. They're very thin metal. It looks like we're far enough in on this one. Snap those C-clips in. Just snapped in just like that into its groove. Make sure it's totally seated in its groove by going around it with a few taps. Boom. Now all we got to do is straighten this out so that this one presses in straight, and then we'll put the clip on the inside of that. And once both of them are on, air compressor just kicked on, we'll do the same story with our yoke and the grease fitting. We'll get the yoke over there with the bearing caps, spin it around, press it in with the bench vise. And that's how we're going to install our U-joint. I mean, you can use the ball joint press to do that. Ball joint / U-joint press. That's way too much pressure than it needs once it's cleaned up. You can use the shop press. It's just, it doesn't take that much force. Once you got everything cleaned up, new U-joint going in, just put it in the bench vise. If you can't get your clips in because it's not showing enough, put a little socket between there because this can bottom out on the vise. And then we tighten and it'll actually push that cap in a little further so that we can see our groove now. We're all put back together, pretty clean. We're gonna put a little grease on the spline so it slides back together through the hub easy. We greased up the grease fitting, so now we just clean up this end here. Still gotta clean that up, and we're just gonna slide it right through there and spin it till it locks in. All right, let's do it. All right, shaft's in there. Just give it a little wiggle, jiggle, shimmy, shake, turn a roo. It'll seat in there till it's all the way back. Next step, hub assembly. See, pretty self-explanatory. 4 bolts. Go into the 4 bolt holes. Just make sure your wire sensor is straight up. So we're going to set that in there. It's going to seat into the groove straight of this. Make sure you're going straight in. Your splines are lined up. Boom. Then start your bolts in from the back and tighten. I'm going to take these bolts, clean them up on the wire wheel. I've greased the inside of here, so the next guy does not have to go through what I've gone through. And then we tighten the hub down and move on to the next step. All right, we got our hub tightened down, went back and forth, side to side. You know, let's pretend you didn't take your tie rod end off. That's not part of this video. And all right, we're not going to worry about that wheel speed sensor till last. We'll get the brakes all put back together. Next thing is put your washer and your axle nut on and snug it up. You don't have to do final torque, but I just torqued it. If you don't have any special tools or anything, have somebody hit the brake pedal up in there or put a board on it while you use your torque wrench. I've got my book out right here. Dodge Ram 2500 pickup, 4-wheel drive. All right, foot-pounds, front axle nut, 94 and 95, 180 foot-pounds. 96 to 99, 175. 2000 to 2002, 180 foot-pounds. And what do we got here? 03 to 05. With 2-wheel drive? Nope, we don't care about that. 4-wheel drive, independent suspension is 185 foot-pounds. And this is going to be actually it's exactly the same as 06 to 07 as well. And it looks like it's the same for 08 and 09. All right, let's roll. All right, procedure 12 in this book. Let me go to the back and we'll see what procedure 12 says. It's important to torque those axle nuts down to spec, by the way, guys. What do we got here? Tighten axle nut to 132 foot-pounds. Rotate axle 5 to 10 times to seat hub bearings. Tighten axle nut to 263 foot-pounds. Align axle nut to next forward cotter pin hole and install cotter pin. All right. That'll about cover all your bases, right? All right, so next thing I'm going to do is pop the rotor back on here. Clean up those brake pads and the mounting bracket. Zip it on from the back with those 18 millimeter bolts. Our caliper, we're going to make sure these are nice and greased and moving. That one is nice. And we pressed back that caliper just a little bit to get it off with a screwdriver in the slots of the rotor, nice and safely, not gouging nothing. We're going to put that caliper on that bracket. And I do believe you have to, on these ones, press up with the caliper, up into the top, and then line up the bottom. Then line up the 12 millimeter bolts in the back of the caliper. Tighten those down. They are skinny. Don't over torque and snap them off, but get them nice and tight. That means our caliper's on. And then after that, we'll disconnect our wheel speed sensor right behind here. Our old one we cut off. And fish our new sensor through. Clip it in. Bada boom. So that covers brakes and the sensor and all that. And yeah, don't forget to put your cotter key through there if you have this style. And then we'll put our tire on. 24 millimeter lug nuts, tighten those down. Don't forget to press your brake pedal in till it gets stiff. You know, give it a good 10 pumps. Make sure the the pads are seated up against the rotor because we did press the caliper in a little bit. All right, take her over for a test drive, check for noises and whatnot. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care.